Thanks for joining us. It's wonderful to have you. I'm so glad to have Linda Conrad from Director of Strategic Risk Management at Zurich. Linda leads a global team responsible for delivering practical solutions to Zurich and customers on strategic issues, business resilience, supply chain risk, enterprise risk management, risk culture, and total risk profile. Linda also addresses enterprise resilience issues, including CNBC, and Financial Times as featured in the Wall Street Journal microsite at supplychainrisk.com. And I've actually seen the video. Linda holds a specialist designation in ERM, Emergency Risk Management, and serves on the Global Education Advisory Board of the Institute for Risk Management in London. She's deputy member of the ERM Committee of RIMS, sits in the Supply Chain Business Leadership Council, and was chairwoman of the Asian Risk Management Conference. She taught at the University of Delaware, Catholic Program, and Master's of Supply Chain Management Program at the University of Ross School, and where she serves on the Corporate Advisory Council. Linda studied at the Graduate Institute of International Studies in Geneva, Switzerland, and at Fox Business School. So please warm a round of applause and welcome for Linda.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. And good to see no one is asleep yet. That's always a plus. In fact, I'm really glad that we're talking about this topic because it is really, has gotten a lot of press lately. I don't know how much time you're allowed to watch the news. I know that you'd be pretty busy with your studies, but you've all heard about the West Coast port slowdown and the impact of that. I was actually on CNBC Nightly Business Report on Monday discussing all of the earnings calls from last week that have been impacted by the port slowdown. So I have just a couple sentences on it, but there's a lot of statistics and things included in it. So but you all have two things for homework we're done here. One is to watch the Nightly Business Report. I can send you a link and take a look at the earnings per share impact of supply chain management so that you see how important studying really gets to the real world operations. Not just getting goods from A to B, it's so much more significant than that. And stories you'll hear companies, it was retailers, but like Potter Barn and Lululemon, really said that the impact of the port slowdown was significant to them. So what we're seeing now is really very valuable to talk about. Okay, can you, lost the picture, but can you still hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes?
Yes? We can see you and hear you. I was just trying, the noise was coming a little bit slower, and so I'm going to try to save some bandwidth. I might play around with unless you hear any major concerns.
Okay, that's great. And one thing to say is, I hope this will be a conversation. So as we go through this, I would love it if you find things that you want to ask questions about. Just stop me, interrupt me along the way, and borrow the cell phone, and then call it out so we can talk about it before you forget, okay? All right, so let's move ahead onto the second slide. And you can just kind of click through. There should be 5 boxes. And I think a lot of the slides that I have in an introduction will be familiar. Well, of course, we don't have to go into all of the reasons that supply chain management is important now. I just told you some earnings, but I do try to keep a watch out as you meet people like your travel, find out whether companies have a supply chain risk manager or someone in charge of supply chain, someone in charge of shipment. Because what we're seeing is that more companies are starting to put someone specifically in place to manage the risk of supply chain. So rather than it's kind of just around, you see the cost of the supply chain, the supplies that you're purchasing, really it's on the reliability, the total cost of ownership. Are you all familiar with that term total cost of ownership?
Yep.
Loud and clear.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, awesome. Awesome, great. So one of the things that Zurich as an insurance company spends a lot of time talking to companies is broadening the definition of total cost of ownership. So factoring in some of those things like recovery costs, or you had this great deal in China, so you went with a low-cost provider, but then you had to switch over to someone else, things in open market had their rate something. All those actually add back into the total cost of ownership of good. And so one of the things we're helping CFO think about is don't just sign off on that great low price deal, but let's look at historically over time how much these disruptions are costing to people, factoring in even earnings per share from disruptions, so that they truly get a whole picture of how much it's costing them to bring product from A to B. Because as you probably understand, when you talk to people who are in procurement, they are rewarded. So their job description is often to take cost out of the supply chain, but as you well know, that often means going to a sole source provider or someone in some untested region of the world where they've gotten this great deal, and that necessarily often will bring greater risk into the value chain. Whoa, echo, echo, echo. Shall I hang up? Can you hear the echo on your side?
Yes.
Okay. The joys of technology. One other thing I wanted to talk to you about, you see on this slide, just-in-time manufacturers. Of course, you're familiar with that. You're familiar with just-in-case, just-in-sequence manufacturing, of course. But one of the questions that we find is important to ask is, what do you do just in time, in case? So if something goes wrong in the supply chain, what are the backup plans, just in case? Oh, this is really bad. All right, so let's move ahead. So keep that in mind, this just in case, this idea of just in case, of having a backup plan. This is essential because we have found in our studies that only about 10% of companies have a what's called business continuity plan with their suppliers. 10%. Who thinks that's kind of low? Right, you might really, when you're purchasing, you might want to try to think through, what if something goes wrong? What if some link in the chain breaks? What are we going to do? So that's really what we try to work with companies to have that plan B. All right, on the next slide, here's where these blank boxes, this is where I like to talk to companies and get them to tell us what their challenges have been. And they're often pretty significant, like we heard from the port slowdown. So we try to get people talking. And one of the things you'll find out is that often the role that you're studying for is siloed in one particular area of the business and doesn't necessarily talk to someone from risk management or the CFO or treasurer. And even though, yeah.
What slide are you on?
I'm on the second slide. Where there's,
I think the echo is on your side.
okay, I'll mute it. Okay, is that better?
Much better.
Okay.
It might be that your speakers are next to your microphone.
Okay, I'll just move the phone away. Sorry.
Do you have speakers to the computer?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's make sure that those are not next to the microphone. That was my problem.
Okay. Let me see if I can turn it off.
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay. Good. All right. Sorry about that, guys. All right. So let's move ahead. One of the, as I said, one of the things that we want you to start to think about is, it's still bad. Not quite sure how to turn the speakers off on this computer.
kill a cell phone link until a period of time.
Yeah, let's see if it,
Just kill it.
see that
Just do it straight up.
Okay, we're going to try this.
No, I think it's the speaker.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, just
how's
kill
that?
a cell phone link.
Any better?
why do we need this?
Not really. All right, any idea how to turn speakers off on the computer?
Yeah. On the bottom right-hand corner, there is a speaker icon.
Say it again?
So on the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little icon with a speaker on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and click on that.
You should be able to mute.
Yeah, I have it all the way down. That's why I'm wondering. It's all the way down.
Okay.
So
So we're gonna go ahead and, I'm gonna go ahead and hang up the cell phone, maybe that's the problem.
Okay, I think it might be.
Now we need a sign guy in the middle.
All right, how's that?
Good, good. Good.
Good.
Better? Okay. I know okay, just, yeah, sign language, guys.
Did you type it in?
All right, let's try again. It was the cell phone. All right, so as I said, one of the key things is to try to talk to companies about this backup plans, and it involves folks studying what you're studying now, getting out of the silo and being part of the management team or talking to other folks within the company so that you can raise this topic of supply chain as being essential. Now let's move on to the next slide, which looks like a kind of crazy graph. It says supply chain disruptions increasingly impact financial performance. You have that up? Okay, good. This is a study done by MIT and Georgia Tech, and what they have studied is the overall shareholder impact from supply chain disruptions. So this study started in 2005, so this is not kind of a new phenomenon. And what you can see is that companies the idea is to help recover, this is the recovery curve, to not have such a big dip in the recovery curve through doing some advanced or business continuity planning, because as you can see, the long-term shareholder impact is 10 to 30%. Now this has been echoed by a study done by the World Economic Forum, and this would be some other homework for all of you, is to search for the World Economic Forum supply chain report that was done last year. Zurich contributed to it, and what we found was that the shareholder impact was around 10%. Last year. So this is validated, and this is a major thing for companies. It's not just, you didn't get goods to the shelves, but it's really out there in the public through the shareholder price. On the next slide, you'll see enterprise risk management wheel. I like to call this, you remember the wheel of fortune? I always call this the wheel of misfortune. Like all those awful things that can happen to you if the company's not managed. And it's important to kind of think broadly, this holistic approach, because in fact, supply chain, as you know, can impact so many other areas of the company that it's really important to keep it really broad and to think about this holistically and not in isolation. So let's keep going through some of these things. Now here's a study on the next slide, slide 6, has a graph. A pie chart that you'll see. This is a study that Zurich does every year with the Business Continuity Institute. So we do a survey of companies in about 800 companies usually reply every year, and it ranges across the entire globe. And what we've seen is that every year, at least 85% of companies said they have had supply chain disruptions. So even the best run companies, with large departments doing this, are having supply chain disruptions because there's so many links in the chain. It's really like a spider web more than a chain anymore. And 50% had more than one disruption. So it's not you were unlucky one time, but it's a repeat thing. But the stat on the right-hand side is what I really want you to pay attention to. 42% of disruptions occurred below Tier 1. Does that surprise anybody? See, that's why you guys are good. You're professionals. That's why you're studying this. If you talk to a CFO they'll say things like, well, we speak to our procurement team and they've dealt with these suppliers for years, or you'll hear we have good contractual relationships, and we have a really good force majeure clause, or all these things that they think they can rely on from a contractual basis. But guess what? If almost half of the disruptions are not even coming from that direct supplier, as you can imagine, the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers are completely out of your control. And that's why actually Zurich has developed an insurance product to address it, which we can talk about a little bit later. Hi guys. I see some new folks. Hey. Okay, so keep that in mind, because that's an important statistic that even the best run procurement teams, even with great contractual arrangements, first of all, if something goes wrong, you're going to go to China and through the legal system there and try to collect? Probably not. So that's why Zurich has developed this supply chain insurance, which we frankly think should be one of the tools in the tool belt for everybody that's in procurement to kind of keep your overall cost of ownership down. Okay, next slide. This is a study that Zurich has done for over a decade now. We've been collecting, we lovingly call it our supply chain disruption database. And this disruption database shows across different industries and geographies some different statistics about the reasons for disruptions. And as you can see here, natural disasters, which is the first thing that most people think of, right? We hear about the tsunami in Japan causing problems with the auto industry, or the Thai floods hurting the hard disk drive industry. Well, as you can see here, natural disasters is the 4th most frequent cause. So there's 3 things above that that are really causing more of the problems. And I think it's important for you to start thinking about some of these kind of unusual causes. I know you guys are young, but does anybody remember the volcano in Iceland a couple years ago?
Yep.
Okay. So that was a huge impact on supply chain. We had over 500 disruptions come into our database just in that week alone. And there was no physical damage. Now this is an important concept for you to understand relative to insurance, because when you get out in the working world, you will talk to people in the risk management position who are buying insurance, and they'll say, it's okay, we've got it covered. We insure our suppliers in case there's a fire or a flood at their factory. Right, so that's physical damage at the supplier site. And that does happen. But as you can see here, it's the 3rd from the bottom, physical damage. So don't just think that that's the only cause of disruption. There's lots of other things going on. On the next slide, you'll see the impact of disruptions. This is on slide 8. And as you would imagine, almost everyone incurred financial costs, but take a look at corporate image cost. That means brand damage. That probably means shareholder damage. Now, as many of you may know, if you look in the 10K of most companies when they file, you will notice that there's a risk section. Did you know that? Anybody read the risk section for a company? Okay, that's some more homework for you. I hope you're keeping track of all these assignments. Pick up any company, go online and look at their PDF of an annual report. And they usually have a risk section that says, if you invest with us, you might be faced with such and such risk to your investment. And many companies are now putting supply chain in there as a risk factor. So this is a big issue, and corporate image is what happens is that their brand gets damaged. Okay, the duration.